Welcome back, everyone, to today's explainer. Today, we're tackling something that literally weighs a ton on so many of us, and that is perfectionism. We're going to be unpacking a really brilliant piece of writing by pastoral clinical counselor Friar John Baptist. It's called Perfection Redefined, Wholly Not Flawless. In this explainer, we'll see how he completely deconstructs what true perfection actually means. And honestly, we're going to strip away those exhausting, heavy expectations that get placed on us every single day. Okay, let's dive into this. What does it actually mean to be perfect? I really want you to stop for a second and think about your own baseline assumption here. Like, when you hear the word perfect, what pops into your head? Do you picture a completely spotless record, never ever making a mistake, having your entire life perfectly put together with absolutely no loose ends? It's a deeply personal question, but the way we answer it internally completely dictates our daily happiness, our stress levels, and, well, how we view ourselves. Moving right into Section 1, the perfectionism trap, and its psychological reality. To ground our spiritual exploration in some solid behavioral science, the author points to the foundational work of psychologists Paul Hewitt and Gordon Flett. Back in 1991, they found that perfectionism generally comes in three distinct forms. First up, we've got self-oriented perfectionism. This is where we are just relentlessly demanding absolute flawlessness from ourselves. Number two is other-oriented perfectionism. Now, this happens when we take those impossible standards and project them outward, basically expecting everyone around us to be flawless. And honestly, that just makes us super judgmental and constantly disappointed. And third, socially prescribed perfectionism. This is that deep-rooted nagging belief that society or our friends or our family will only value us if we never mess up. Let's be real, just trying to keep up the illusion that everything is flawless is completely exhausting, isn't it? Looking at these three categories, it's pretty obvious why striving for this kind of perfection just leaves us feeling totally miserable and isolated. I just want us to sit with this for a moment. This relentless desire to be flawless. It creates an incredibly heavy burden. If we are constantly measuring ourselves and others against this utterly impossible standard of never messing up, think about how draining that is. It is a massive psychological weight for us to carry every single day. We end up spending all our energy just terrified of dropping the ball, living in constant fear of what might happen if we finally let our guard down. That brings us to Section 2, Greek versus Hebrew ideals. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Friar John Baptist brings in the insights of author Ronald Rolheiser to show us how our whole definition of perfection changes completely depending on the historical lens we're looking through. Let's compare these two side by side. The text describes the Greek ideal as having absolutely no faults, zero weaknesses, and no deficiencies. A perfect person, in this view, measures up flawlessly to an ideal standard. It's static, it's rigid, it's completely unmoving. But then we have the Hebrew ideal. Over here, perfection is defined as continuing to walk faithfully with God despite our flaws. Do you feel the stark contrast there? I mean, the Greek ideal demands this impossible, frozen state of flawlessness. But the Hebrew ideal? It's freeing. It's an active, ongoing movement. It fully expects you to have flaws, but it simply asks you to keep walking. Anyway. Next up is Section 3, the spiritual burden, and the flawed thinking behind it. The main issue the author identifies here is that this super rigid Greek definition has quietly sort of leaked into our modern spiritual lives. And this fundamental misunderstanding completely corrupts how we view our own worth, how we interact in our relationships, and ultimately, how we live out our faith. The author outlines these clear signs of spiritual perfectionism to really watch out for. First off, believing God loves us only when we finally stop struggling. We somehow think we have to completely clean ourselves up before we're even worthy of love. Second, judging others harshly because they fail to meet our totally rigid expectations, which, let's face it, absolutely destroys our communities. And third, hiding our weaknesses out of a really deep fear of rejection. It is just tragic when we feel forced to hide who we truly are simply because we bought into this lie that love is entirely conditional on us not having any struggles. So the crucial point is that holiness is not the same as flawlessness. This right here is the absolute core message of Friar John Baptist's writing. He argues that you absolutely do not have to be completely free of mistakes, weaknesses, or struggles to be a holy, worthy person. In fact, in his view, holding on to this impossible standard of being flawless is actually the very thing getting in the way of true spiritual growth. Let's dive into Section 4, Redefining Christian Maturity. If perfection isn't about never making a mistake, the author actually suggests a brand new, much healthier metric for what it means to truly be mature. Christian maturity is defined here as the willingness to remain honest, open, and faithful before God rather than the construction of a perfect image. Take a second to let the warmth of that sink in. True maturity, according to the text, is actually found in continuous honesty. It's about being entirely open about where you fall short and staying faithful right there in that vulnerable space, instead of completely exhausting yourself trying to build this shiny, fake exterior for everybody else to admire. This brings us to an incredibly powerful quote directly from the source material that just perfectly captures this entire shift in mindset. Friar John Baptist writes, "A holy person is not someone who never falls, but someone who keeps allowing grace to lift, correct, and transform them." This adds some undeniable weight to the text's really liberating idea. Falling down does not automatically disqualify us from being holy. What actually makes someone holy is their willingness to let grace pick them back up and change them. Let's move to and see how this builds into section 5, a healthier foundation. And this brilliantly illustrates the nuance of this paradigm shift. You see, letting go of the impossible standard of perfectionism is actually a foundation for genuine, sustainable growth. It is absolutely not a free pass or an excuse to just stagnate. A healthier foundation means, first, it does not excuse harmful behavior. We don't just shrug and say, well, nobody's perfect when we intentionally hurt someone, right? Second, it maintains our personal responsibility to grow and to do better. But here is the absolute magic in the third point. We face our failures without deciding we literally are failures. We own our mistakes, sure, but we refuse to internalize them as our core identity. And finally, we keep a heart open to truth, mercy, and correction. Because that kind of openness, that is how true transformation actually happens. As we start to bring this explainer to a close, I want to share one more deeply encouraging thought from the text. God does not wait for us at the end of perfection. God walks with us through the unfinished journey. The author really wants readers to feel the profound relief of that truth. You don't have to somehow reach this imaginary finish line of flawlessness before you're accompanied, valued, and loved. You are walking together right now, right in the middle of the messiness of your own unfinished journey. So, I leave you with this final provocative thought. Will you keep walking? Remember, the text argues that the Hebrew ideal of perfection isn't about standing still in some frozen state of flawlessness. It's all about forward movement. The author is really challenging us to drop that incredibly heavy expectation of being flawless, to embrace the grace of our unfinished journeys, and to simply keep walking. Thanks so much for exploring this source material with me today on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.